This is a dish that I think is emblematic of my cuisine and my style that developed over many years. This is what they call a Coffin Bay oyster. I mean, Coffin Bay is in South Australia, pristine waters. These are very much like the Japanese Komatsu oysters, and why I love these is because they're quite small. They're just a perfect mouthful. They have this beautiful deep shell, so the oyster is really quite creamy and briny. The name is quite evocative. It's oyster with grilled sea foam. Obviously you can't grilled sea foam, but it's an idea of putting on the menu and just getting some intellectual and emotional response straight away so that people start to think before they eat. So obviously the sea foam is that wash that comes up onto the beach, so it looks physically like that, but then we grill it. Ultimately it has to be delicious, and I think this is. The first thing, freshly shucked. I mean, it goes without saying that you're opening your own oysters. If you're not, get out of the game. So a lot of people like to go in through here. That's the easiest way. What happens though is then they get pieces of shell, then they have to wash the oyster, which defeats the whole purpose. So I prefer to go in through the hinge, so get a nice sharp heavy handled shucker, doubled over, quartered tea towel here so we don't stab ourselves, and then just straight in through the hinge here. I mean, it takes a little bit of practice. If you're not at the right angle, it makes for hard work like most things. So just tip off that brine. Normally I would keep that. I'm going to add it to my sea foam, and then holding there we just scrape along the shell, and just to remove that abductor muscle. And I like just to turn the oysters over. You can see that gorgeous fat plump oyster. They're in good condition, these. They're not spawning or anything. Not quite as creamy as I would like, but good nonetheless. So for this part, because we're using a burner, we don't want to burn the bench. We want to just make something that's going to hold the oyster upright like this. The alfoil is perfect, obviously heat proof, and holds it nice and steady. And here we have our sea foam. This is a mixture of water, vinegar, sugar, nice proportion. Then we have infused it with bay leaves, fresh bay leaves and fresh dill peppercorns. Again, it's just a balance between the sweetness and acidity. We've also added some of the natural liquor from the oysters into this, the seawater, so it gives that salinity. You know, I can also say hand on heart that it is grilled sea foam. It does have some seawater component. So we want to whisk this up. This has a product called Versa Whip. You can also use egg white powder, but it's not quite as successful. So I like Versa Whip, and you want this nice fluffy foamy mousse. This drops out quite quickly. And then basically a nice big spoonful of that straight on the top. You just want just enough on there. You want to protect the oyster from cooking. The oyster will just warm up. You don't want it to cook at all. So a nice hot burner here, and then just put the burner straight on, directly onto that sea foam. You can see it bubbling away, but because it's just thick enough, it's going to protect the oyster from cooking. And then we've done something that's slightly evocative in terms of the grilled sea foam. For me, it's all about the balance, the oyster, the creaminess, the salinity, then the slight sweetness of the sea foam, the herbal elements, and then the unctuous creaminess of the topping as well, with that slight burnt toffee at the top. So it's a perfect balance in terms of hot and cold, sweet, sour and salty. There's some charred elements to it there. So for me, that encapsulates everything that I'm trying to achieve in my cuisine. Last thing here is just the presentation. So choose a nice plate. We've got just plain salt, just mixed with beaten egg white. So you just need enough beaten egg white just to moisten the salt and just hold up. And so basically it should just be like wet sand. We just pop the oyster on that and that's it. So it's very much a Japanese, minimalist aesthetic, which I love. If I can just have one element on a plate, that's what I actually try to achieve. I think I'm just going to eat it now. Straight in with an oyster fork, stab the oyster. You see the oyster is perfectly just warm, cold on the bottom, warm on the top. Nice coating of that liquor, and then straight in. It's absolutely fucking delicious. Seriously, chefs often don't get to eat enough of their own food, but that is really, really good.